Hello. So we've less than 40 days to go until the general election. A good bit less than that, in fact. I was watching some coverage of campaigning in Leeds yesterday, which is a bit of a battleground, as it was during the EU referendum, exactly 50-50. Leeds is an interesting place because as a northern city you'd expect it to be Labour, but that's not quite the case. It's a pretty mixed bag, actually. So Leeds is a good sort of template to look at the state of UK politics. Anyway, I'm going to be making a lot of videos obviously connected with this because I think it was for the 2015 general election, I made a video per party. I'm probably not going to do that this time, rather talk about just snippets of things that I think are topical, maybe within party context. For this video, I want to talk about the Conservatives and something I really dislike about conservative thinking. Now, in case anyone sort of has a knee-jerk reaction here and says, oh, you're a socialist, you're Labour, I'm not, actually. I'm not affiliated with any party, and I'm not even 100% sure who I'm going to vote for this time around. I do like my local MP. I think I respect her work on the committee about reality television, Julie Elliott. I think she's quite a good MP. I'll probably give her my vote this year, but I'm not 100% settled on that. She's Labour, by the way, but middle ground Labour. So I came across this post about Corbyn's proposals for tax. Now, I haven't looked at them in detail, and I understand the party manifestos aren't fully published yet, so I can't talk about the finer details. I want to talk more about a broad principle here, because the person that posted this was referring to multinational companies and the super rich finding tax havens overseas, and the UK is one of the top countries for the super rich to find tax havens, not within the UK but from overseas tax havens from this country, i.e. they're residing in the UK but they're not paying tax here. There was a big scandal involving Starbucks a few years ago, I remember, caused a lot of anger. Now here's the thing that gets me. I can understand people criticising Corbyn and being very wary of Corbyn, but what got me is the Conservatives who replied to this. Their knee-jerk thing was about criticising Corbyn and not really seeming to have any problem with tax avoidance of the super rich. Now, I can understand the argument that huge taxes against the super rich will only make them go overseas, and that's they're job creators and that's not good for the economy. But the basic principle of fairness is an issue here, and Conservatives cannot simultaneously talk about the big society. Okay, I know that's a term associated with the Cameron era, but it's something they still pitch on. We're all in this together. And a lot of Conservatives have tried very hard to shake off the image that they're a party for the rich. I remember Jeremy Hunt got irritated during the leadership campaign when he says we've tried very hard to shake off this image. But this just proves they have a long way to go. I don't believe that the average Conservative member is a super rich, like Jacob Rees-Mogg type caricature. I don't. I believe there's many normal people on average incomes who do vote Tory, but I think the party attitude is still very much in lieu to the rich. I do not believe in my heart that the Tories have the most vulnerable in society in their heart. I don't believe that this is a party that really cares about the most vulnerable in society, and it doesn't have sympathies with the super rich. I don't believe the average Tory is super rich, but I believe as a party the Tories are far more likely to defend multinationals that are tax dodging than they are to be fair in their attitude towards claimants. Or what I mean to say is they're more likely to to demand that claimants who fiddle their expenses are punished, rather than recognising the fairness of charging a bit more tax for the super rich. That is a fundamental conservative thinking that I really have a problem with. They cannot say that they are not a party in lieu to the rich when they have that mentality, when they're going out of their way to defend the super rich. There is this prevailing mentality within conservative ranks that, oh well, the rich are job creators, and they are. I'm not disputing that, but I think it is a basic fairness that if you're a multi-billionaire, you pay more in tax than an average earner. That's hardly some communist idea. It's just a question of fairness. And for conservatives to have this knee-jerk attitude of, oh well, there's something wrong with that, says to me a lot about their way of thinking. I think that a lot of conservatives do look up to the super rich. They admire them because they think, oh, they're successful people, they're job creators, and that's fine, they are successful people, but you know, there has to be a moral question here as well, namely about fairness. Why shouldn't the super rich pay more? Why is it okay for multinationals to dodge tax when small businesses are struggling to get by? And the Tories love to talk about being the party for small businesses. So it's a bit hypocritical, frankly. This attitude about wealth and poverty is fundamentally something I do struggle with in terms of conservative thinking. And I'm not a socialist. I don't, for example, believe in punishing the rich. That's not the issue here. So I'd need to look into Corbyn's policy specifically. If it's too high, that is obviously unrealistic because it's too high. It's not realistic. But the basic principle that it should be more than the average earner, it should be a no-brainer. You don't need to be an economist to see that's just common sense. And I do wonder why conservatives have this knee-jerk response of defending it. Not saying necessarily conservative politicians, because they will insist that the rich are paying more, and maybe they are. But it's this mentality about some conservative supporters. They seem to have a problem with that. And the same people will be very vocal, you can guarantee, when it comes to benefit fraudsters. They'll be enraged about it. Like that Conservative candidate, I believe she was somewhere in Merseyside, or I can't remember precisely the seat, but she claimed, or it emerged that she had said that she was fuming with rage watching Benefit Street, and we need to put these people down. Now she's apologised for it, but it says a lot about conservative thinking. Like she would be enraged about that, but I bet she had no rage over banking bonuses at the height of the Great Recession. That's conservative thinking. Conservatives don't really care about massive banking bonuses at the height of the recession. They are far more likely to get enraged about benefit fraud, which is wrong. I'm not condoning it, but the fact is, benefit fraud, whilst it's a problem, it costs the economy far less than overseas tax havens. That's a fact. So until the Conservatives stop pandering to the super rich, or at least until they stop giving the impression that they're okay with that sort of thing, with that sort of tax dodging, then they can't really talk about we're all in it together. I do not believe that conservatives, I'm not talking necessarily about individual conservatives. I know individual conservatives, for example, who are compassionate towards the homeless. They're not bad people, they give to charity, they're decent people, but there is a fundamental mentality that wealth is right. That if someone is wealthy, oh well, they're successful, they're good. There is a fundamental way of thinking within conservative ranks that does stipulate that if someone is wealthy, they're a good person, or rather they're good for the country. Not always so. And I would say, you know, there's been a lot said about Jeremy Corbyn's attitude to Russia and foreign policy in that regard, and I have big reservations about his positions there. But I do think that the Tories need to be scrutinised for the number of Russian oligarchs that are funding them. I think it's fair to ask questions about that. I think every party should face scrutiny when there are foreign donors. Anyway, this is just my opinion, you don't have to agree, but this is why I cannot bring myself to vote Tory. I might agree with them in other areas, they're tougher line on crime, for example, overall, but when it comes to basic fairness of wealth, I'm not convinced that the Tories have their heart in the right place. I accept that they'll get a lot of support because, you know, there is something to be said about entrepreneurialism, opportunities, backing up small businesses, but I would suggest that, you know, making excuses for overseas tax dodging is not backing up small businesses. So I have a big problem with that sort of mentality. And I'm not convinced that the Tories have the most vulnerable people in society at heart. I'm just not convinced of it. My gut feeling is they're a party that admires wealth and believes that if someone is struggling with unemployment or homelessness, then it's their own fault, or rather it's their own mistakes. It's always something they've done wrong. I don't think that the Conservatives really care about individual stories in that regard. So someone's signing on, a lot of Conservatives think, well, they're just lazy. They're lazy dole scroungers. If they're homeless, they'll think, oh well, they're just drug addicts, or they've made mistakes in their life. People fall through the cracks. People have different experiences. And whilst I think, of course, individual Tories members and supporters will have had their own struggles, you know, it's not for me to judge their life experience, I do think there's a major lack of empathy and a lack of compassion from a lot of Tory ranks. I really do. Despite what they say, I am not convinced. I don't trust them. I do not trust that the Tories as a party, not talking about individuals, as a party have the most vulnerable at heart. And it is a fact that rough sleeping has significantly increased under their tenure. It's just a fact. Final words here. I will be saying a lot more about party policy as I learn more, and I'm in no rush to endorse Corbyn's Labour. Although, like I say, I like my local MP, I get quite a good vibe from her. But I'll have plenty of things to say about what I think about Jeremy Corbyn and his front bench. I have major concerns about that. But let's say, for the sake of argument, Corbyn actually wins this. If it shakes up the system for a while, that may not be a bad thing. I have big misgivings about a Corbyn government, particularly in foreign policy. But I don't believe that the Prime Minister is a very powerful position, but even a Prime Minister and his front bench can't do everything their own way. So if a Corbyn front bench does shake things up a bit, at least maybe this country needs that for a short time. I'm not a socialist, I hate communism, but maybe if it does kind of shake up, I think there is some fundamental truth in this idea that the Tories believe they are born to rule. I do believe there is some truth in that. I think the Jacob Rees-Moggs of this world do believe that. So if a Corbyn Labour victory shakes things up a bit for a short time, if for no other reason than for us to really reflect on society, maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm sure if there was a Corbyn government, I'd find plenty of reasons to be unhappy with it. But a change in politics isn't always a bad thing. In Britain, we don't like sudden change. And as the last 3 years have shown, it can cause enormous division and bitterness. But we have had for 70 years, well, basically longer than that even, 70 years Conservative and Labour governments, and Conservative governments have either been pretty right-wing or centre-right. Labour governments have had to be centrist. So we haven't really had a genuinely authentic socialist government, and I think there will be a lot of issues with that. But if it shakes things up, if it kind of makes us reflect on ourselves about some of the problems we see in society, maybe that's no bad thing. And I believe that most governments have good and bad. I don't believe a Corbyn government will be 100% bad. If there is more fairness, for example, shown towards welfare claimants, that is a good thing. If there's more compassion and more action taken to alleviate the problem of rough sleeping, that's a good thing. Foreign policy is a big issue for me. Crime, I don't trust Corbyn's Labour. But in other areas, a big shake-up maybe is needed. I'll be making other videos about Labour, I'm sure critical of Labour, the Lib Dems, the Greens, the Brexit Party. But for now, I just want to say I do not trust the Tories when it comes to issues of the wealth poverty gap. I don't believe that they really care about the most vulnerable. They're very good at talking about opportunity, and that has its place. It's very important. They're very good about talking about self-reliance. Again, there's something to be said for that. But I think the Tories still are very judgmental about those who are struggling most in society. I think they're very judgmental, and I think they are still in lieu of the rich. Not all of them. I don't think the average Tory member necessarily feels that way, but I think as a party, yeah, I think they are in lieu of the rich. And my basis for that is the sort of mentalities that we see whenever proposals like taxing or targeting tax dodgers is raised. Tories have a knee-jerk response. Why?